Sometimes, or usually, you don't know who the judges are or where they're sitting until it's too late. For example, if Lee were one of the judges, and we're talking about this because it was really a great time that we had over there at the party, and there was all those guys and gals, and we had just a wonderful time. How'd I do, Lee?
I couldn't hear anything you said.
So how many points did I get? None. A big fat 0. So if you want more points, make sure that the judges, and that's the only ones you're speaking to, you got to make it look like you're speaking to the whole congregation, the whole group, but it's not. You're only speaking to the judges and making sure they can hear you. That's number 1. Project all the way to the back. Number 2 is don't turn your back on the audience. Keep your notes in front of you. Try to avoid doing that. Put your laptop in front of you like this to where you have the information in front of you instead. Something else you don't want to do, because it's just in poor taste, because the lectern is the place to speak from, not the place to lean on. And so avoid leaning on it. And even what's cool about most lecterns is they have this ridge around here, which when you're really nervous, it gives you something to hold on to. But when you're standing here holding on to this, a lot of times it moves and it becomes distracting to the audience. And then Lee, of course, is not going to give you any points for that either. Next thing you want to do is you want to be flexible. And the reason you want to be flexible is because a lot of times you will run out of time before... Is anybody timing me, by the way? You are. Oh, good. Good. That's because I'm taking up both speakers' time right now. A lot of times you will have... This could have been a 22-minute speech. A lot of times you'll have a lot of extra time, sometimes you won't. And if you know you're speaking, let's say, from 10 to 15 minutes, and you know things are tight, you may really want to tighten that speech up and drop out a paragraph out of the middle. But the worst thing was I didn't have time to prepare this speech tonight, so this is why I'm using a lot of notes up here, and I was running late, and I just didn't have time to even look at the notes or anything. Don't apologize. Don't apologize for either being late or for not knowing the material, not having enough time to research, not being prepared enough, and not being nervous. I'm so nervous up here. Biggest key. Avoid lyrics, avoid messages that are in poor content. Does anybody know what the Toastmasters International policy is on bad vocabulary or religion or race or politics or anything like that? Does anybody know what the official guidelines of Toastmasters International is? You're going to love this. Anything goes. Anything goes. Your club decides what's appropriate for you. If you wanted to have a political speech, do it. We did one the Monday before we voted on Tuesday. It was outrageous, man. It was a debate it was fun. You can do one on religion. You can do one on race. You can do one on sexual orientation. You can do it on anything you want because this is your club. However, remember the prospects that are in here. And if you are doing one that is in poor taste, and your first guest walks through the door and sees that, they may be the first one to walk out the door and say, I'm not going there. You know what they're doing in there? So the more appropriate you keep it, the better you're going to have success and a chance of bringing people back one more time. At the end of the speech, avoid saying thank you. At the end of your speech, what you do is you turn to the Toastmaster and say, Mr. Toastmaster, or Miss Toastmaster, and then turn the time back over them that way rather than saying, oh, thank you. Of course, you can say thank you if it's a table topic, I guess. And then the last thing you do is you can return the control of the meeting back to the back to the Toastmaster of the day. Any questions about being the speaker?
I have a question.
Yes.
What's the difference between return the control of the meeting and turning the meeting over?
Because we're not really turning the meeting over.
Like, what's an example of each one?
The Toastmaster controls the lectern, and because he controls the lectern, he gives control to the speaker who speaks. When he's done, he returns control back to the Toastmaster. But you're not really turning the meeting over to somebody else, because he already possessed it. The timer. So how are you controlling how much time I'm spending on this? Have you got a stopwatch there? Good job. One thing that he's doing that's most appropriate tonight is that he is sitting where I can see this thing here, even though I wasn't paying attention to it. But here's, by using a stopwatch, and this is where, in fact, I will tell you what happened last night. By using a stopwatch, you can be very accurate on timing people's speeches. And this may be critical, because when you go into a speech contest, your speech is to be 5 to 7 minutes. You actually can speak for 7 minutes and 30 seconds and still win the contest. But if you speak for 7 minutes and 31 seconds, no matter how good your speech is, you've gone. That's the end. You don't get a retake. That 1 second can mean the difference between winning and losing. And that's why it's so important for your timer to be very accurate in timing. And rather than simply say you qualified, he should say you spoke for 7 minutes and 31 seconds. Last night we had some fantastic evaluations. 3 minutes and 30 seconds is the maximum time, and she went over by 1 second. And she was the one that also competed this year in the evaluation contest. She knows better, but yet over by 1 second. That could cost her a lot. And then finally, I want you to make sure that you report accurate times at the end of the meeting when you're called on. Good? Yes?
I have a question.
Mhm.
At what point do you start the timing? Is it when they first?
Oh, you know, I should
speak,
have said
the first
something
word?
like that. Even though I didn't say anything, that would have been the first gesture or the first word. Now tonight, I stood there and I asked Kayla if she was, I wanted to verify that she was my evaluator, and I wanted to give her my book. In reality, that should have been when the timer began. But we all know that that wasn't really the beginning of the speech. But if I would have gone, I can't believe this, that would have been, with or without words, would have been the beginning. Make sense? And your last word, not your last gesture. Which is why you say, Mr. Toastmaster. And they know, done. This is really important that if he was sitting here like this and I didn't see that, it's one thing. But if it's up like this here, you know, then there's no question about being able to see the time. When do you take the red card down? If it's a 5 to 7 minute speech and you have spoken for 5 minutes, the green flag comes up, right? And then at the end of that 6 minutes, the yellow flag goes up. And at 7 minutes, the red flag goes up. At what point do you take the red flag down? Trick question. Trick question.
Never.
Never. Why not?
Because then they'll know if they went over.
Because it's not to tell you that you've gone 7 minutes and 30 seconds. It's to tell you you've gone 7 minutes. That extra 30 seconds is your cushion that you should never get into. If you have a 5 to 7 minute speech, you practice that until you make that 7 minutes. And then you have all the time in the world, especially if you have laughter or a question or anything else that comes up in the middle of it. That takes care of that extra 30 seconds. The duties of the audience What are the duties of the audience? Yes. There you go, you got it. To apply. Here's the key. Lee is all the way back in the back. And the Toastmaster says, please welcome Lee. At what point do we start clapping when he rounds that last part of the table, right? No, Caleb?
Until he goes all the way up there.
From the time that you say Lee until the time he gets up here, and whoever is in control of the lectern, whoever's the Toastmaster of the day, whoever's the president, or the sergeant of arms, you're the one that begins the applause. And as long as you applaud, come on, applaud me. As long as you applaud, especially while we're waiting for Lee to come up, as long as you applaud, they will applaud. You see? I stop and you stop. By the same token, whoever's in control of the lectern, make sure you're the one that starts the applause, and make sure when Lee is done and goes all the way back to the back, make sure you applaud at least till he gets to his chair. He doesn't have to sit completely down. Blah, 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 blah. Blah, 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 blah. No. No. Yes. Whether you're in a Toastmasters meeting or whether you are in a professional seminar, if you're in a play, don't get up till the lights go on or until you have a break or between speakers. It's just common courtesy and etiquette, not just Toastmasters, but in the whole world, to be sure you stay seated. Unless you really have to go potty that bad. The other thing you do is make sure that your cell phones are on silent. They're going to ask you many times, please turn off your cell phones. Nobody turns them off. We don't turn them off, right? Make sure it's on silent. Make sure your ringer is down. Make sure that none of those boings come up that tells you you've got a message waiting. That's just common. Now, speaking of the Wizard of Oz, your job is to look for crutch words, fillers. So, have I had any yet?
I counted them.
Oh, rats. What other types of things do you look for when you are the master?
I look for words that they repeat commonly, even if they aren't the typical filler words. Sometimes people have other words that they use, like really, like. Yeah.
Or if you start to say something, and you say it again, that would be another one. Another thing, the master usually is the same person as the grammarian. Usually, not always. So listen for great uses of grammar. If they quote a poet, if they say something that is using, for example, the word of the day, something like that, that would be a great use of grammar. And you would want to make sure that you pay attention when they're doing that word of the day. And make sure you identify how many times they've actually done it. And then at the end of it, make sure that you give your report at the end of it so that everybody knows and remembers, I didn't say the word of the day, did I? Finally, when you close the meeting, eventually, is there anybody here who has not been the Toastmaster of the day yet? There you go, he just volunteered. So you've all done it eventually at one time or another. This is really important. Again, you're going back to that guest and making sure that you ask him to give us some comments. You are the leader when you are the Toastmaster. You're in